I'm Gary Livingood. Today is Saturday, June the 8th, 2019. I am at the Community Media Center in Westminster, Maryland, to speak with Chuck Mechel as part of the Veterans Oral History Collection. Chuck, I understand that you were in the military. Is that correct?
26 plus years.
26. And when did you go in?
Early February 1949.
Now, were you enlisted or?
Right. I didn't want to be drafted.
So what branch of service did you go in?
Air Force.
Air Force.
Yep.
And can you give me a little history about your experiences in the Air Force?
Well, from the beginning, of course, you went through basic training. Then I went to, because I liked airplanes, that's why I came in the Air Force. Was in the Civil Air Patrol part way back when, before then. And so we went basic training, then I wanted to go with airplanes, obviously, and unfortunately the service had different ideas, and I went to radar maintenance school in Biloxi, Mississippi. So between the radar maintenance, fundamentals and all that stuff, it was almost a year of training. And then when we finished that kind of training, we got drafted to be instructors. The Korean War, of course, was on then. And then went to instructor school, and I started teaching electronics, fundamentals. Sometime later, I went into the maintenance area. I was at a field site working on a radar or maintaining a radar that was used for training. And then in 1955, excuse me, all that time I was at Keesler Field in Biloxi, Mississippi. 1955, there was a whole group of us got drafted to go to Taiwan. And we were assigned to what was called Air Force Section MAG, Military Assistance Advisory Group there. And we got a briefing from some Army general when we got there. They already had an advisory team there, but it was very small. There was about 250 plus of us that came up there. And we were given a briefing by this Army general that said, we're here for 72 hours. And he said, that's what you are, to augment the Republic of Chinese Air Force at these various radar sites. And okay. And he says at the end, this was our greeting. At the end of that 72 hours, we're either going to have help here to supplement what you're doing, or going to be gone. The they were worried about the Chinese communists invading them, called Formosa. So we ended up and I ended up on a remote radar site, and we had just a nucleus of people. Like we had 4 guys in maintenance, and they had a number of operations people. And so I stayed there, and we were on that site, and then guys were going home for some reason, and I liked it. It was really a neat place. And I stayed in Taiwan that time till 1957. And then I came back to the U.S., and I was based at a radar site in Montana, Opine, Montana, next to the Canadian border and North Dakota border. From there, I ended up going to OCS. I had applied for OCS. And unfortunately, I'd had an automobile accident and didn't recover very well, and I ended up in a hospital and was eliminated from training. And then I went to another radar site in northern Wisconsin, in Anago, Wisconsin, 676. And that's where I met my lovely wife in 1958. And we had planned on getting married. We got engaged around the 1st of July. And come 1 August, I got orders, of all places, to go back to Taiwan. So I picked her up at work. Now, we were going to get married in October, but everything was set. And I said, how would you like a honeymoon in Taiwan? Where's Taiwan? Well, she found out in a hurry. But then the Chi-Com started shelling the offshore islands. And we were on our sort of on a honeymoon in a way. We were headed east. My folks and my family were in Massachusetts. And so when we got to my folks' place, she said, call your mother-in-law. So I called my mother-in-law back in Wisconsin. And she said, the state police are looking for you. And I said, what's up? And she says, you can't, Joanne can't go, my wife. She can't go anymore. I had a concurrent travel approved. She can't go. Don't ship your household goods. Don't ship your car, which had all been approved. I said, what's going on? She says, because the Chinese communists had started shelling the offshore islands owned by Formosa, the Republic of China, Chiang Kai-shek, she can't go. And I said, oh, and stop the shipment. So I called our guys at the radar base, and I said, where's the household goods? She says, on the siding, waiting for the train. I said, take them off, for you can't go. So I went ahead, and she had to stay home, and that was really bad. And because, like I said, we got married on the 15th of August, and this was first part of September. And so I ended up going over there, and she eventually, we didn't have any problem. I went to radar site and all. And then she came over on the January 1st of February, I guess, of 1959, and we stayed there until 1961. And then I got reassigned to what was called a Ground Electronics Installation Agency, GEA, and Ground Electronics Engineering Installation Agency, which we had responsibility in the north central part of the U.S. for installing, modifying, relocating radar and ground radio equipment. So that was pretty good there. I mean, a lot of travel. I mean, I was on the road all the time. Mm-hmm. And then, so I put in for a special assignment, and in 63, we went to Iran. And I was assigned to the Army mission there, which Air Force section portion of Army mission, and another military assistance advisory group. So we were over there, and then she came over later on.
What city in Iran?
Taipei. No, I'm sorry, Tehran. We were in Tehran.
Okay.
Yeah. Initially, when I was in Taiwan, for the most part, it was when she came over, we were in Taipei, Taiwan. Get the T's mixed up. And then we were in Tehran. When we were in Taipei, our son Steve was born there. And then when we got to Taiwan, or Iran later on in Tehran, we stayed there. We got there in 63, 65. Yeah, 63 to 65. Then I went to what they called, I had put in for what was referred to as 9-level school. For enlisted men, you had different progressions through the skill levels of your work, and 9 being the top. You had 3, 5, 7, 9. And I was put in for this 9-level school, and I was assigned there for a year. And then we went from Taiwan to 66. We went, yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, didn't go to another radar site in the States. I went to back to Iran, I believe it was, yeah. 66 to, no, I went to headquarters GEA up at Griffiths Air Force Base in New York State. And I became, what was called a programmer for sending the different GEA teams out to whatever they're doing, wherever, even up into Canada. Had an interesting thing up. They were replacing a certain cable for the radio people from a semi-rigid to a flexible coaxial line, which came on 13-foot diameter wooden reels. And there was this one site up in Canada where we were putting this mod in, that when the lowboy truck came down the road, a dirt road to this radar site on the Mid-Canada line, or Pine Tree line, it was too big to go underneath the underpass. So but thank goodness it was a dirt road, so they got a whole bulldozer and dug the road out, and that way they could get the reel of cable to the site, among many different interesting things that occurred there. And then from there we went to 65, 66, 68, and then we went to Turkey. And we were stationed in Ankara, lived in Ankara. I was assigned again to a military assistance advisory group. They're called the Joint United States Military Mission for Aid to Turkey. That's a mouthful. And so we stayed there for a couple of years and traveled around Turkey, and very interesting. We traveled quite a bit around the country. A lot of biblical relations to Turkey and all that.
Yes.
Because I used to tell people, they said, "Where's Ankara?" And I said, "Well, in Ankara, if you went an hour east, you came to King Midas's tomb of the Golden Touch. This was also where the Turks stopped the Greeks when they tried to take over western Turkey after World War I. There was a river there. And if you went on top of the Tell, where Midas's tomb was, you could look down, and here was the ancient Roman road that went from Sardis over on the Aegean, I think so, all the way across Turkey that ended up over towards India. So a very historical place. We used to go camping on the Mediterranean coast, and I used to tell people that if you got up on a high hill, someplace along the coast of Turkey, southern Turkey, on the Mediterranean, with a pair of binoculars, you will see ancient ruins. Ancient ruins were all over the place. Really very interesting. Really, we went to Ephesus, and it was a very interesting, besides working with the Turks, very nationalistic people, but we enjoyed it. We traveled, and interesting work. I enjoyed. I apparently got along quite well with all the locals and what have you. And so we were there until '68.
And your wife has been with you.
Oh yeah, I was very fortunate that she and the family went with me. Our son was born. The second son was born in Iran. And '66, we came back to the States, and then about '68 we went to Turkey. Right, in '70 we came back, and here I was assigned to Fortuna Air Force Station, North Dakota. And people say, "Where is that?" And I say, "We were 3 miles from Montana, and we were 3 miles from Canada, up in the northwest, 160 miles northwest of Minot." In fact, our post office was in Westby, Montana, and I spent 2 years there. That was a very interesting assignment there. I was primarily responsible for maintenance control, and then later I had they had a big, what they call a frequency diversity radar there, an FPS 35, which of course that's all gone. But that was a very challenging job there, keeping that big machine running. It was a huge radar and all the equipment downstairs. And it was good. We met a lot of nice people up there. Wife played organ at the local Lutheran church. I used to say that we were Methodists, married in a Baptist church. She played the organ in a Lutheran church there. So we were Lutherans there, and it became never stationed abroad in a Christian country, Turkey, Iran, and Taiwan. And so we didn't subscribe to many of the things that went on, but as a passing point. But we had it. It was interesting, and well, like I say, my assignments were very interesting. Primarily working with the locals, military, and getting along well with the local civilians, and it was, as my good friend Walt, that lives up in Hanover, he said he was a retired Army colonel, and he said, "Oh, I envy your assignments. All I did was I was an infantry and then a signal officer," and he said, "You really had a very, very interesting career."
Yeah, because you were right during the period in military assistance commands of having to go to Vietnam.
Well, when I was in headquarters GIA, I had a lot to do with our efforts in Vietnam. And in fact, I used to have to come in, I had to, there were no two ways about it, to talk to our teams that we had deployed over there doing various jobs. And around the time of the Tet offensive in '68, I had a team at one of the air bases, and we would go in early in the morning so we could talk to our team chiefs. That was almost a daily basis that we called, talked to each other on the phone, see what's going on. And during the Tet, he gave me a call. We were talking there and waiting for the call. He called, and I said, "How's it going?" "Oh," he said, "there's a mess here." And I said, "Oh," he says, "Everybody okay?" "Yeah," he said, "Everybody okay." He said, "But the security people, they want to take my backhoe and dig foxholes." And I said, well, I don't know. And I said, "Hey, bud, they're protecting your butt, and you're going to deny them the use of a backhoe to dig foxholes? Come on, get a life, you know." I'll never forget that. But yeah, I had several very high priority projects at that time. Not only was this in Vietnam, but over in Thailand. There was one instance I had a program where it was a very high priority, and they were very anxious to get this job. And I had through my contracts people, I had to work through a lot of different people. They're primarily all civil service, but we had military. And this was at Griffiths Air Force Base in New York. And I had this one job where they needed to get some equipment over to Thailand very quick, to the point that I had a C-133 cargo master flew into this airport in Columbus, Ohio, and it was dedicated transport right from Columbus, Ohio to this airport in northern Thailand to deliver the equipment. And sometimes they had a pretty high pressure on getting the jobs done. But things quieted down, and before I left there, this was at Griffiths headquarters, and of course, you know, being the military and the government, you gotta have all kinds of paperwork to get anything done. And we did a lot of work with the National Guard. I think we had about 17 GIA squadrons throughout the U.S., some being National Guard, some being active Air Force. And one day I got a telex, we didn't have email then, a telex that the National Guard were going to move some radar equipment from a radar site that was being decommissioned in the United States and move it to Puerto Rico. And I well, what's all this about? I said, "Well, I haven't seen any paperwork. We got a big manual that tells you what you're supposed to do and all that." And none of this had crossed my deck. They were going to send a National Guard aircraft to California to get not only the radar equipment, but the tower and everything that it was inside of, and fly it to Puerto Rico for another Puerto Rican Air National Guard location. So, dumb me, I called the Pentagon to the National Guard Bureau and tried to trace down where's the paperwork on all of this. And I finally got a call back from some general in the Pentagon, I don't know who it was. And he said, "What's your problem, son?" And I said, "I don't have any paperwork on this, you know, in accordance to Air Force, blah, blah, blah." He says, "This is he said, "I'm chief of the Air Force National Guard Bureau here in the Pentagon." And he says, "We're not going to bother with that." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? You got to have accountability for the equipment and all that stuff." He said, the Guard is taking down the site and the equipment. The Guard is going to load it on the airplanes. They're going to fly it to Puerto Rico on a Guard airplane. And the Guard in Puerto Rico is going to install it for the Guard use. You got that?" "Yes, General." I knew enough to shut up then. So, but it was one of the interesting things that went on in life. So,
And he was able to do that because the Guard is state?
well, there were several states involved. I don't know where the airplane came from.
But not Fed.
Pardon?
But not federal.
No. These were all, doing their duty time. You know, they have to do training all the
Sure.
time, the Guard. And this was what they were getting their training in by moving this radar site to Puerto Rico. It's all Guard assets, you know. So, okay, they took care of it. And I didn't, and so you keep your mouth shut, Marco. You know. So, no, other than that, and then, let's see, where were we? About 72, we came back to Fortuna, and then we went to Turkey. No, we came back from Turkey, 72. And then I lost my train of thought. Where am I? I'm in Fortuna. And we got another.
Well, because you entered the Air
72,
Force in the 40s.
I went back to Iran. Yeah, that's it. We went back to Iran.
Okay.
In 72. And then a lot of the same people were there. And I decided, well, we got a new commanding general. Took over. We had a jewel of a fellow I worked for before, General Druin. And he shipped up. His tour was up. He and his family left, and we got a new general came in, took over. And we didn't get along. He was something else. So I said, well, I've had enough of this. So I'm going to put in my papers and retire. And I started working on resumes and sending them everywhere. And this one Iranian general, who, in fact, he was the director of comm and electronics for the whole Air Force. And he says, I understand you're sending out resumes. And I says, that's right, General, I'm going to retire in end of June. And he says, have you thought about giving us a resume? I said, no. He said, give me your resume. Okay. So I gave him a resume, and we were getting ready to go back to the States. And he said, we want you to come to work for us. And I said, oh. And he said, yeah. I said, well, I have to go back to the States to process the paperwork for my retirement and all that. Yeah. And he said, okay. But he said, when you get ready and you want to come back, he says, we'll give you a ticket and you can to get you back here to Iran. And I said, my wife and family? Oh yeah, no problem. So we came back to the States, and she stayed with her mom in Wisconsin, and I processed the paperwork, retired. We spent a few weeks or so, I don't remember, and went back to Iran, and now I ended up with a direct services contract with the Iranian Air Force. And that was a one-year contract, and ended up in 2 years. And I worked not directly under the general, but in his department there. And that was we got along quite well.
Well, he was obviously very impressed with your work product.
Well, backing up a bit, he was a major my first tour in Iran. And I was working over one of the jobs I had. We were working with him in their air training command there to establish electronics fundamental school. And he was the contact point in their training command that I was working with. So like I say, I had known him from my previous assignment there. And we got along quite well. Poor guy got shot when the mullahs came in and took over. But anyway, so we went back to Iran, and like I say, had a 75, 76 one-year contract, got another contract for 76, 77, and then they wanted me to stay on, and I said, well, I need more money. I said, there hasn't been any more increase in pay. And I said, remember, there was a company that was selling bodies to the Iranian Air Force. Most of them were retired colonels, and they had an office down the hall from where I was. And well, back it up a little bit, I helped negotiate that contract with this company, not directly, but through the Iranians. I put my 2 cents in when they asked me to. And so I know what they had paid per man year. And I said, and that was a year earlier. And I said, so I'll come to work, but I want to come to work for you at the same scale as what you're paying that company for those people. Oh, we never have a direct service this is the personnel people. You never have a direct service contract with anybody for that kind of money. I'm going home. And about that time, Westinghouse offered me a position here in Baltimore. And here we are.
And what type of position?
I was a project manager at Westinghouse. I ended up in their integrated logistics support program, and or division, I should say. How I relate that to an automobile dealer. You got guys out in the sales front room selling the cars, right? And you got the maintenance guys in the back taking care of it. Well, I relate to the maintenance guys in that, we had to provide manuals, test equipment, engineering services, parts, supplies, you name it. And as a project manager, I coordinated all of this business, whatever the program was. And so we stayed there from 77 to, at Westinghouse, till I was forced into retirement in the first drawdown they had. They had a big cutback in 1991. And luckily, I had enough time to retire. And never forget this. They brought some big shots in from Pittsburgh, who was corporate headquarters for Westinghouse. And I happened to be interviewed with this fella with my wife. And he was from Human Resources up in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And he said, you're retiring and all that. And I said, well, I was 60. And I said, to be honest with you, I don't want to retire. I said, I'm only 60 years old, got a lot of time to go. He said, well, if you don't retire, you're fired.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much choice there, was there? So in February of 1961, 61, what am I talking about? In 91, mm-hmm. I became a unemployed, retired somebody out here. I put out a lot of resumes here, there, and everywhere, but it was a bad time to be looking for a job in 91. And consequently, I've been enjoying life with my wife and family since then. And we ended up here in, it's so funny how we ended up in Carroll County, because while the people I worked for, their headquarters were at Hunt Valley, I was working at the plant at the airport, at the Westinghouse plant there. And we had our other program managers supporting the equipment were co-located with the people building the equipment, the radars are going out. And so it worked out okay, but come 91, that was it. That we had a big drawdown, or Westinghouse did, which they formed a resource center. The corporation did a resource center where we're going to, supposedly all the people retiring, they could get leads on other places and mm-hmm. and so forth. So they go in there, and one of the fellows one time, he went to this resource center, and according to him, he said, I looked around, and all I saw was white hair. Everybody in here is no spring chickens anymore, And so he looked into it and talked to the lawyers, and he said, I think we've got an age discrimination suit going on here, which they hired some lawyers from Washington, and we all had to kick in some money to the pot to hire them. And their expectations, they told us, was to make us well. When was the point in time that you felt you were going to retire? I said, 65. Well, we're going to make you well, as if you had continued your employment. They were going after those years that you were not working, And well, that all came to naught. Westinghouse sold the defense center, a division that's here in Baltimore, to Northrop Grumman, and Northrop Grumman put a offer on the table, take it or leave it, and so we ended up taking it, and we got a little bit of money, but
yeah,
nothing of what they were promised, and so I've been on the streets since then and taking it easy.
But you're in a position where you're able to enjoy.
Oh yeah. Well, I had Air Force retirement too, also,
Sure.
And then I'd had enough time with Westinghouse that I had a, well, it wasn't a pension, but I had a choice of taking a pension or buy it or accumulated something. So I took the buyout rather than which they didn't. It was my savings that was being matched that I put in the Westinghouse pot. You know, I guess it was 6% you could put in, and they matched it or something. So that funds, I had talked to a broker, and he set up a plan, and so we're doing pretty good.
Very good. Very good. You have 2 children or more?
Two. 2 boys.
And they're grown now, right?
Well, the one is, the other joined the Navy. The youngest son, our son that was born in Iran, and he was an electronic technician, and he was electrocuted on the job over in Naples. He was at a microwave or communication site in just outside of Naples in Italy, and at work one day he got electrocuted and died right there.
What a
So
shame.
that was very heart-wrenching.
Was he married at the time?
No.
No. Okay, and how old was he?
Paul. 23, 22, something like that.
That's awful young.
Yeah. Yeah, he'd just been selected for promotion to, he was an electronic technician 2nd grade, and he'd been just selected to go to ET3, ET1, 2, 3, and when he was electrocuted, and they brought his remains back here, and we had him buried in Wisconsin. What anybody takes out of this, do some planning ahead. A death in the family is a very bad time to try to do planning and what you're doing. Your head's not on straight.
Oh, sure.
And we should have had him buried at Arlington, because in years to come, who's to even, I've got a wonderful sister-in-law. Every year, as soon as the frost is out of the ground, she's out in the cemetery taking care of the family graves and all. And she's not going to be around much longer either, you know. She's getting older, and I don't see any of the other people in the family picking it up. And it should have definitely gone to Arlington. In fact, we're thinking about, not seriously, a possibility of moving him to Arlington. And my wife keeps telling me that I should make that choice, and then she could be buried there as well. Yeah.
I see.
Though I think now they're just taking remains of cremation now, and built a big new columbarium down there now, and instead of they're running out of real estate, you know, down at Arlington. So
Yeah.
that's to be decided. But I urge anybody, plan ahead.
That's good advice.
So we're here and enjoying life.
Well, you've had an action-filled and very interesting life.
Oh yeah.
But the one thing that impresses me as much as anything else is I'm aware of your age, in the late 80s. You have a full head of hair. How did you accomplish that?
Hanging in there.
I'm teasing you.
Sure, but we had, up until, I guess now 2 or 3 years ago, we did a lot of walking. You know, we used to have a Volksmarch club here in Carroll County called the Piedmont Pacers. And I was a trail master for the club, laying out hiking trails where we'd hold events and so forth. And my wife and I participated. One day, how we got involved with this, between the Westinghouse plant and the airport in Fort Meade was a German deli there. I used to go down and for lunchtime, and I'd get a bratwurst or a liverwurst sandwich and sit outside under the tree. And one day I went down there, and there was a poster that talked about a Volksmarch. I had no idea what a Volksmarch was, but I knew what Volks meant, and I knew what March meant. And I said to Joanne, I said, maybe we should go look and see what this is all about. And so we did. I forget where the event was. And in the Baltimore, Washington area. And hey, this is all right. You know, they had 5 and 10. Well, at that time they only had 10-kilometer trails and 20, and you could walk at your own pace, and they took you by interesting places. And, yeah, we liked this, you know. So we took it up, and we drove all over eastern Pennsylvania and northern Virginia. And when we, excuse me, going to Massachusetts or Wisconsin to visit family, we tried to plan a route where we would take in a walk, and we really enjoyed it. And met a lot of wonderful people from all over, and we did walks in Europe as well. And
is that what happened to your right knee?
no, my right knee just gave up. But the biggest problem was my hip. I had to have which caused me to have to keep walking. Is I had to have my hip replaced, my right hip, and they pinched a nerve, and I've got neuropathy real bad in my right leg, and I just can't walk that much anymore. So that ended that, and so we're sort of in a, let's say, floating mood now, I guess. So
well, and you spent a considerable number of years in the military as well as others, but the military specifically, can you describe what impact the military experiences may have had in your life upon the rest of your life?
Well, first and foremost, appreciate what we have here in the United States. Our freedom, you don't have to worry about what we say to each other or friends, which in many places that I've been in the world, you've got to be very guarded on what you say and when, and where. And we don't have to worry about that here. And and we're held up. I'll tell you an experience I had in Iran. And it's very pertinent to what's going on today. He was a civilian engineer working in the same directorate I was at headquarters, and he was coming around, and on payday, he would come around, and he was giving a very good exchange rate for dollars to the Iranian rial. So much better than what was on the market. Mm-hmm. And so I said to him one day, I said, why are you getting all this dollars? He says, my wife is pregnant, and I need those dollars because I'm sending her to the United States to have the baby. So the child will be a U.S. citizen. Mm-hmm. Now, I have personal experience in that regard. And so this is on the news today about these asylum seekers and what have you, right down the alley. Same alley in a sense, you know, and that's what he was doing. Yeah, piling up dollars, giving a very favorable rate. Let's say at that time it was, you could get 75 reals to $1 US. He was giving 80 or 100 reals to the dollar, you know, because all our transactions in the local economy, of course, were all in the local currency. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And but that fits right hand in glove with what one of the problems we're having today with the folks coming into the U.S. No, the people there's good people everywhere. I found that out. I mean, oh yeah, you got some not so nice people everywhere, and but I found out if you're quite honest with them, people treat them fairly, you'll get the same in return. No, there's good people everywhere.
And that's extremely accurate. It's been my experience in life anyway.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, sir, I thank you very much for your time and for your observations, and I want to thank you again for your service.